we'll call together the Planning Commission special meeting for reorganization, and we'll have roll call by the secretary.
So I think we have a new member that I missed last time. Jean.
Jean Strong.
Jean Strong. Couldn't remember your last name, Jean. Sorry. So all are present today: Jean Strong, Terry Carter, Judy Pullinen, Ryan Sylvester, and Ted Stryhouse.
Okay, great. I think we'll come back to 3 and 4 for whomever. So we'll take nominees for chairperson.
I nominate Terry Gurdek Carter.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll second.
Ryan?
I second that motion.
Any discussion?
All good.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations, Terry.
Thanks, Rose.
You can take over.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'd like to hear nominations for vice chair. I'll nominate Ryan.
Sitting with his head down. I'll second.
Are you ready, willing, and able, Ryan?
Sure.
Okay, all those in favor signify, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, let's someone make a nomination for, wait, no, we don't need that. Recording secretary. I'll nominate Abby.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we're going to nominate and elect a clerk. The clerk doesn't necessarily have to do the minutes. Judy and I have kind of figured out a system for those whenever Abby can't be here, because she's not going to be here in May. So I don't know. Yeah, I guess we need to do that though, because every planning commission in the state has to have a clerk. Jean, you want to be clerk?
I was going to nominate Judy to be the clerk.
I'll second that. Any discussion?
You didn't ask me if I'm willing.
Are you ready to do it? Well, if you write, I'll type.
Okay.
That's our agreement. If she writes, I type. All those in favor signify by, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, adopt Robert's Rules of Order. I sent that to everybody.
It's that short version, but that's it.
I did, yeah. I looked online and some of them were super long. Do you think there's anything in the long version we should know?
That's basically the basics.
Okay. Okay, I'll make a motion to adopt Robert's Rules of Order. Can I get a second? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, we need to choose a paper of record.
What does that we use now?
We use the Vermont Journal, it is free now. We had a backup. It's not free?
No, it's not free. All of our advertisements cost money.
Oh, really? All the warnings?
Yeah.
Yes, everything costs money. That's why, we try to limit them and make them smaller or whatever. But that's what we just follow what the select board and the trustees do.
Okay.
And they use the Vermont Journal rules?
Yes, they do.
Last year we nominated the Vermont Journal, and a couple months later we nominated the Rutland Herald also, just in case we ever got into a bind as to having to warn an open hearing, because the Rutland Herald's a lot quicker than the Journal. You gotta get there. It's really hard between our meeting and the trustees' meetings and the select board meeting to warn a meeting for 15 days under the Vermont Journal's deadlines and get it done. So we did nominate both last year. And if we want to do that, or just nominate the Journal. Anybody have a preference? But Rose, the Rutland Herald's more expensive?
The Rutland Herald is usually a backup to the DRB and to the other boards also. So for the same situation, you can just fill it up.
Okay.
So it's always the Vermont Journal and then the Rutland Herald is backup.
So I'm gonna nominate the Vermont Journal and the Rutland Herald as a backup.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and adopt our rules of procedure. I took out the part about the alternate, because I think you all know, I heard from the state, we're not allowed to have an alternate unless we are also a DRB and we approve zoning and stuff, which we don't. So I think everything else is the same as last year. I know we went through talking about putting the word citizen in there instead of resident, and Eric Alden advised us on that, and I ended up contacting the League of Cities and Towns, Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and they said the same thing. You don't want to put the word citizen. It needs to say resident, and resident means you live here, and this is your home. It's 185 days of the year, something like that.
Did Brandon ever hear back on if it was allowed to have it based on, surrounding towns, or it was just majority of the board or had to be residential?
Oh, no, I have the language right here, actually, in my notebook over here. It says the one member can be from an adjoining town, but they also have to be a resident of that town. The majority have to be Ludlow residents. Mr. Alden?
Thank you for helping address that. On this topic, I believe your section 2.1 on your membership is in direct violation of state statute. You've changed the language on this to coincide with discussion that this board has had. Yeah, so state statute is the majority has to be residents. And if residents aren't found, after the majority, the select board has the option to appoint anyone they please. You don't have to be a resident of an abutting town,
It's not actually what the Vermont League of Cities and Towns said. They said they have to be a resident. They said it's understood. That's why they said you don't need to write all that, because it's understood that they're residents. Maggie sent me the email.
Let me
Sent me, the lawyer from.
If I could finish. The state statute is very clear. Secondly, the planning commission doesn't have the authority to dictate who gets appointed to this board. That's the select board's responsibility. As this is the Dillon's rule state, the select board gets all of their powers through the legislature. The statute on this is very clear. The statute states the majority. Putting that aside, it seems short-sighted that this board would spend even a minute of time discussing ways to prevent people from participating in the building and future of their town. It's just short-sighted, and it's not something that the planning commission has the authority to do. The planning commission doesn't dictate who gets put on this board or how. You can make your rules of operating, but you don't make the rules to say who gets put on this board. That's the select board. Now, based on the state statute, the select board doesn't have to appoint anyone that is not a resident. That's their option. But they have that option for a reason. Current board shows that, in time right now, there's a seat that was filled because there wasn't enough local residents that wanted to step up and be on the board. The past election sort of compounds that. There were many positions that weren't filled because local residents didn't want to fill those positions. There weren't people that stepped up for those. So I would contend that 2.1 is in direct violation of state statute. It's not something that this board should do, I get that there's folks on this board that don't like that someone who doesn't live here might have a say or participate in what happens in this town. I get it. But it's really short-sighted, and history shows that there's been many times that these seats have been hard to fill. So why would this board go out of its way and have any discussion on how to limit someone that would want to participate? Thank you.
And just for this board's information, I sent this exact verbiage to the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and they had no problem with it. They just said change the word resident, or citizen to resident, and that was the only change that they wanted. And they said to get rid of the alternate thing because you're not allowed to have an alternate.
I've got the statutes right here. Can I read them aloud?
Yeah.
Okay. A planning commission shall not have less than 3 nor more than 9 voting members. Okay, so we're fine. All members may be compensated, blah, blah. Let's get to the, at least a majority of the members of a planning commission shall be residents of the municipality. So a majority is 3. So we may use those words or change it to 3. The legislative body of a rural town or not more than 2 elected or appointed officials of an urban municipality who are chosen by the legislative body of the urban municipality shall be non-voting ex officio members of a planning commission. I didn't think about that.
That means the select board are non-voting members.
Okay, good.
That's in our language right here.
Okay, good. But that's the only thing that's in there, is just that it needs to be a majority, and we have 4. So,
And when I wrote to them, they said it's assumed that they are residents. And that the only one that's not appointed needs to be from a neighboring, a budding town.
But, so I have an issue where we're assuming what statute means when it's written clear, black and white. So I have this issue with the VLTC all the time in my profession where I'm told it's discretionary, but it's state statute. It can't be both. So in this case, if that's what we're reading verbatim from the statute, a majority needs to be a resident of the town, it doesn't really speak to the other 2 listers directly in the statute, does it, Judy?
no.
So that's a pretty big assumption, and I do agree with Eric. I think we need all the opinions and all the help we can get on this board. If for any reason board members were to resign or leave or we have open spots, I don't see the point of being restrictive, and this seems restrictive. And I would definitely suggest changing the language of at least 4 of the shall be residents to majority or 3, and removing the line about the 4th and 5th commission shall be a resident. And I'll also go further to say, we are appointed and at the direction of the select board, so our membership isn't decided by us. So should 2.1 even be in our purview? If we're appointed by the select board and work at the pleasure of the select board, why in our rules of regulations are we regulating our membership?
I wanted to do that because I feel strongly that we should be, the people that make zoning for, or propose zoning to the village trustees and the select board ought to be from this town. They ought to be residents of this town. That, I feel strongly about that. And as I said before, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns had no problem with this language. They said that, the state statute exists, but the select board also may, they may decide membership and they can change rules also, as long as they abide by the fact that they are residents of Ludlow or abutting towns.
So, but resident of a budding town isn't anywhere in the statute.
It is somewhere in the statute.
I'd really like to see where.
Do you see that anywhere in the statute? I think it's somewhere else in it. Like not part of 2.1. Well, it sounds like we either we want to.
I would like to make a motion to table this discussion on membership till we talk to our lawyer and then go back to this next meeting, but go through the rest.
Okay, any second?
It's a long motion.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Are there any discussion?
May I have some discussion of this one, or is this?
We're working on our, we're working on our
Rules of procedure.
rules of procedure. All right, Alan, go ahead.
Alan Couch, 21 Meadow Street. I understand and have been involved in this discussion about the board members. And yes, this is an appointed position by the select board and they need to adhere to certain rules and regulations. And there are places where towns, villages can make more restrictive rules than the state. And I don't know if that is the case here. So I would suggest perhaps tabling this until more information is found. You know, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns can say, we prefer this, and the town can say, we prefer this. But sometimes the state overrules that, even though we're trying to be more restrictive. So I would suggest investigating that before you make a decision that may come back and create other issues down the road.
Any other discussion? One thing I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna take that email that I sent, give you guys a copy of all of it. Because that is where we check on the legality of our language. Okay, all those in favor of Judy's motion to table this till next time, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that is tabled. All right, moving on. Next item on our agenda. Approval of minutes from February 22nd, 2024. I said that will be moved to May's meeting because I misunderstood. Abby sent me a text and I thought she wasn't going to be at this meeting. So I said that. So I don't know if we have to move it back there because I said that. Because now she's here and we could take a look at those minutes. Judy, you're my Robert's Rules of Orders expert.
Well,
Does it say it has to be moved?
we should have amended the agenda.
Yeah, we should have amended the agenda at the beginning. Okay, so we can't do that yet. All right, so let's take a look at March 19th minutes. Anybody have any issues with that? That's the minutes that Judy wrote and I typed up.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, moving
I
on.
might have an abstention.
Abstention? Oh, any abstentions?
Because I wasn't here
Yes.
on the board, right.
Okay, comments from citizens. Do we have any comments from citizens? Looks like we got 5 citizens with us today. Mr. Noah Schmidt, newly elected selectman.
Yes, Noah Schmidt, 58 Pleasant Street. I wasn't sure, I know Jason did a housing study that involved Cavendish, and when I was on the planning commission there, I wasn't sure if that, if that was, Ludlow was part of that, and if he presented anything, and basically it was, where are some, prime location for housing development and things like that, so I just wasn't sure if that has come up and if there has been any conversation on that.
Jason, you want to take that one?
Sure, so yes, we did a regional housing study. And the whole idea was to try to identify, better spots in the region for new housing. And it does include Ludlow. And Gary, I don't believe we've come to Ludlow to show you the results of that, so we'd be happy to do that at some point.
Thank you, Noah. I'm going to put that in my notes for a future meeting. Okay, we're moving on to our flood hazard regulations in the village and the town zoning. We have Jason here from Mark, our Regional Planning Commission, to help us update this section. He has some grant money and he can help us up until August, I think you said, Jason? Last time we took a look at he sent us the reason why we're doing this is because our flood regulations are over 10 years old. They are 10 years old. They're from 2014. So he sent us a Vermont model standalone flood hazard bylaw last time. It was totally my fault that he wasn't here because we had changed the meeting date and I hadn't let him know that. So he's here with us now. Last time we just kind of did a read through of the whole thing. And today Jason asked me for any questions anybody had. And so I sent him a copy of our minutes so you could see which sections that we had questions about. So I thought one way to proceed would be Jason, what's your idea on how we should proceed?
I think, we could certainly, go through those questions in the minutes and see if you have other questions, but I'm open, so whatever you folks want to do.
So everybody okay with that? We go through the questions from the minutes? Oh, Rose.
I'm just wondering, after reading the new flood hazard regulations, are we going to adopt the fluvial erosion, the river corridor? We do not have that now.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a very key question here. The model bylaws from the state do in fact have the river corridor language in it. And to complicate matters, Senate Bill 213 has a proposal that would, if passed, the state would sort of take jurisdiction of river corridor regulations statewide. So, that would, if that happens, there isn't perhaps a need for a local regulation. So, you could potentially adopt only the flood components and not adopt the river corridor components. You could revisit it after we understand what the legislature is going to do. There's any number of those sorts of options, I would say.
What's your preference, Rose?
The last map that I saw that had the river corridor went as high up Depot Street as Julie Nichols. So I think that before we ever adopt a river corridor, we need to revisit the maps and make sure that they were adjusted like we asked back several years ago.
I agree with you. I remember talking about this at a previous planning commission, and also the Catholic Church was considered part of the river corridor, and that's where everybody goes that has no place else to go. They set themselves up for that. So it's really high up in the Cold House in the Catholic Church. Yeah. Okay, so what's our board preference? Because Jason did send me an email when I first talked to him about this, and he said that you are welcome to exclude the river corridor provision. And I know the legislature will be done before Jason's done helping us. So we want to just go over that, not do that part right now. It'd probably save us some time. What's the board's preference?
I think that would be wise, because why do it if it might change?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Just wasting our time.
Yeah, let's not do that. Okay, also he said we might want to add back in the local flood hazard area into the model language. That might be something we want to do. I'm just looking at his email when he first talked to him about this. And also he suggested exploring what would change from the existing flood provisions to the new model. Like one change would be increasing from 1 foot to 2 foot above the highest flood stage level. Whether these standards work for Ludlow. And we did talk about that a little bit last month, Jason, that we thought they would not work for Ludlow as far as, the fuel tanks go. We had enough trouble when they were supposed to be 1 foot above the ground that propane companies would not service those fuel tanks. You don't want to bring a ladder with them.
Yeah, I remember you making that change. And I think that would be another thing that we could explore. I think the main thing is with any change to the flood regs, the main the first question is we want to make sure that Ludlow maintains its NFIP eligibility, so National Flood Insurance Program. We want to make sure that the regulations meet those requirements. I don't think you need to raise the tanks. So that would be one thing we could check with DEC if you want to proceed with this language, is whether you could not require the tanks to be raised, just simply anchored, and whether that would be okay. Probably it would be, but I would want to double check.
Okay.
I think we did double check on that, and it didn't make sense to raise the tanks 1 foot, 2 foot, 2 BFE. So they did say that anchoring the tanks or burying them was okay.
Yeah, I think you're right, Rose. I guess, ultimately, when you have you're about to go to, your public hearing, you should get a copy to whoever at DEC is now your floodplain manager. John's long gone. So, we'd want to just make sure that Ned or whoever it is reviews it and make sure it's all okay. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it would be okay to go back on that and not require the tanks to be, 7 feet in the air in some places.
Okay.
Okay, so I hear Jason suggesting that we'll go through our questions that we had for him, and I'm looking at the minutes here.
I'm sorry, Terry, can I address the tanks? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
That's okay. Again, Alan Couch, 21 Meadow Street. Went through the flood of Irene, Tropical Storm Irene. At that time, our oil tank was anchored into the poured basement floor, and while it filled up with water, it did not spill oil. We got a new tank after Irene, and the state said it had to be on certain feet. The oil company came by to inspect it, but it didn't say anything about being bolted to the floor. That tank, when we got flooded, got lifted up by the buoyancy of the tank, spilled oil into the basement, created an issue. The whole deal with the propane tanks being above base flood elevation, I think is not feasible for the propane companies to come fill them. Jerry Sheehan, I think it is, down at the Black River Mobile Home Court, presented stuff back in the summertime about bolting things and creating a slab that's heavier than the empty propane tanks, so it gets rid of the buoyancy of the tank and bolting it down. At that time, he said he got the information from, I think it was Irving, about a certain size slab with chains to hold it to that slab, and I asked if that was an industry standard or where they came up with that. Still haven't gotten a complete response in that respect. When we adopted the flood regs back in, 2014, I was on this commission and everything sounded great. In practical use, some things aren't so great. So I think we need to keep that in mind. And I apologize for being that person who shows up at the 11th hour to bring this to your attention when I was on the board. It's like, where were you when we were discussing this? So I appreciate what you're going through, and I think that in the floodway, in the floodplain, we need to bolt oil tanks into the basement. We need to strap down propane tanks so they don't float downstream. And yeah, precautions look great on paper, but not so much on practical use. So I appreciate your consideration.
Yeah, thank you, Alan, for sharing that practical use tidbit, because we want to make sure as we go through these regs that we do make sure they're bolted. I know we did when we did the other regs, the ones that we sent to the trustees, we did make sure that was in there, that they would have to be anchored. So Jason, I don't think I wrote this down, this first question that we had, but the first question that we actually had was, are these new, this flood model, is it FEMA approved, everything in there? Obviously it probably is, but we want to ask you that question.
When I heard DEC folks answer that question, it was kind of like a yes with an asterisk. I think they FEMA did review it. I think they are okay with it. But there was a level of, it wasn't like 100%. So I think generally speaking, yes, but you never know. And DEC is always reviewing these, so it could change. So you never know. But yes, I think generally you're very safe from a FEMA point of view to use these models.
Okay, my next question for you is, as we go through this, do you want me to share my screen or do you want to share your screen?
If you want to, that is fine with me. Either way.
I'm ready to.
Okay.
Peter, can I share my screen? Okay. Okay. Okay, so I got the language here. Like our first question was on section 4B2. Section 4. And we do want to talk about the chart too, Rose, because I'm sure you have.
The river corridor boundaries.
Yeah, the river corridor boundaries. So we said on streams with a watershed size greater than half a square mile for which with river corridors are not mapped, the standard should apply to the area measured as 50 feet from the top of the stream bank or slope. What was our question about that?
Yeah, I imagine the question is, where are those? So I think I think we talked about just a minute ago, not including the river corridors, so that would potentially go away. But let's talk about it though real quick. Under B1, that's the so-called mapped river corridors. So ANR has a map of it. You can look at it at Flood Ready Vermont. If you Google that website or the ANR Atlas, you can look it up there. Number 2, basically they're referred to as the unmapped river corridors. They're basically most of the tributaries in town. So basically there would be a 50-foot buffer along most of those tributaries. If you pull up either of those online maps, you can see them. But I think what I'm hearing is we're not going to include that. So I'm not going to go too far into that.
Okay, so actually we don't even need to talk about D3 either, right? Because that's still river corridor. Yeah.
That's right.
So the question we had was the model language approved by FEMA that wasn't here, and you already answered that. So number 4 was section 5, D2C. Interior improvements or repairs to existing buildings that cost less than $500. We had a question about that. We just thought that was bizarre.
Yeah, so as I understand it, the thought there is, there's certain improvements that are just so minor that I think $500 is arbitrary, but they're kind of de minimis is what you call them. So there's basically such little impact that just go do it. You're exempt. Who cares? So the state has decided $500 is the threshold. So if you're doing whatever it is that costs less than that, you don't even need a permit.
Are we okay with that? Everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not much money. Okay, so our next section was section 5E3.
Yeah, I think that's the fuel tank thing. So, I'm hearing that we don't want to elevate them. I think that would be okay. But again, I would want to just double check with the DEC folks before it's all said and done to make sure they're okay with that.
Okay, so who do we check with?
Well, at some point, and it could be sooner rather than later, but at some point, we would want to make sure DEC reviews whatever flood regs you want to adopt and make sure it sort of meets the minimum requirements. And so whether it's now or whether it's later, we should do that, make sure that they're okay with that.
Okay,
But this does address the question or the comment about being securely anchored and
Right.
to protect it from flood, so that is.
That isn't here, but the board, we wanted to change because right now it says the DFE, which Mr. Alden explained to us is 2 feet above the 2 foot requirement, so it should be 5, well, it should be 4 feet, which is kind of crazy. So we want to take that out, right? We're all agreeing to take that out? So I'm going to do that in the language right here. And then we're going to check when we get it verified with, yeah, I think, did we already do that? Let's see,
No,
it's just be elevated above, and, yeah, so we want to take out that they must be elevated. Does everybody agree with that? I know that was something Rose wanted us to do in the old language.
Yeah, I think Terry, what I'm hearing is a couple of things. I don't want you to scroll around too much, but I think the definition, so DFE means design flood elevation. And in this model, it's defined as 2 feet above the base flood elevation. So I think we'd want to change that from what I'm hearing to 1 foot. So it's consistent with what you have now. And I think right here where you are, number 3, you could just delete, like you said, must be elevated above the DFE and then it just says securely anchored. And so I think that would do what we're asking, what we're talking about.
Must be elevated.
Yeah. Get rid of that.
Okay. So fuel storage tanks and vents must be securely anchored,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
We all in agreement?
I have a question.
Yeah, Rose?
It's for Jason. Jason, do you know if they plan on changing our flood hazard maps?
Yes, there's FEMA is working on map changes. It's going slower every time they talk to us, so I don't really know when we're going to see them, but we should hopefully see a draft new flood map for Ludlow within a year or 2. It's going to be a little bit before it becomes official, and I think it's going to be more accurate. We have much better topography mapping and so forth. So I think in terms of the elevation, it'll be a lot more accurate, but we'll wait and see it when it is available.
Thank you.
Judy has a question?
So the second part of that, number 3, says storage tanks may be placed underground if a qualified professional certifies the installation will be anchored and protected from flood forces. My question is, when it says be placed underground, does that include like in a cellar or basement? Or is that just underground? I thought you couldn't have like underground tanks.
Fuel, I think the gasoline
Gas
stations
tanks,
and stuff we're
propane.
talking about.
Oh, okay.
Propane you can.
That's what I'm thinking houses.
Yeah, and also my daughter's propane tank is underground at her house in Waterbury. Okay, and our next question was on VE4 on page 9. I'm not sure what that means at all. We need an explanation.
Yeah. So it's weird language. You actually have it now in your flood regs. What it essentially means is there's different flood zone determinations. So there's the AE zone where we know the flood elevation. And then there's a zone A where we don't know what the flood elevation is. And so despite what it's hard to understand what it means. Generally speaking, in zone A's in town, and there are a few, this would apply. Basically, it's a pain in those zones. You're going to have an engineer to basically make sure that you meet the standard. Essentially, you can't raise whatever the development is, you can't raise the flood elevation more than 1 foot at any point within the community. Basically, you need an engineer to do that.
Okay. Are people clear on that now?
That was as clear as mud for me. I'll be honest.
Basically, when it's not clear, you need an engineer.
Yes,
Yeah.
More or less.
I would say.
Yeah, so just to kind of drill down a little bit more. So there's a zone AE, they call it. Those parts of the floodplain in town, the flood elevation is known. And so it's a lot easier, whatever the number is, 340 feet or something. So it's easy to say, okay, well, let's build it up to 341. So you're 1 foot above it. And a surveyor or engineer, any number of folks can tell you, yes, you're there. These other zones, zone A, we don't know where the flood elevation is. And so this standard basically treats it like a floodway, and it's complicated. And you as the homeowner need to hire an engineer, probably, to prove that you're not going to raise the flood elevation in town as a result of the project.
So does that look like a variance?
Not exactly. It looks like a really complicated equation. And what you're really looking for is the engineer to say, you're good. It's not going to raise the flood waters more than a foot anywhere in town, basically, is what you're looking for.
Okay, so those are the questions we had, but I don't want to ignore the chart. Like, we were noticing that the charts have changed at the Alan Couch.
I appreciate the development potentially raising the base or raising the flood elevation a foot in town, right? We need to raise our house up. If you drive down our street, the base flood elevation is 6 inches above like the bottom of our front door. So we want to elevate our house. At the same time, we want to fill in our foundation so we no longer have a basement. So in theory, our 1,200 square foot by 8 foot basement, so 1,000 cubic feet or whatever, is going to have to go somewhere. So we are potentially elevating our house, but increasing the flood down the road. Maybe not a foot, maybe not 6 inches, but we are potentially pushing that flood water somewhere else, because that reservoir, that tiny little bit of reservoir that we have that fills up, will go somewhere else. The base flood elevation at our house, again, is like 8 inches above the bottom of our front door. So we have to go up. And it was funny because I'm thinking base flood elevation, we must have hit that during Irene. No, the flood in July was 10 inches above Irene. And we were right at the FEMA map for base flood elevation. And now we need to go up at least a foot above that, potentially 2 feet, 3 feet, so that we can sleep at night. So that's a reference point. I would never have known that until this fall when we actually got a survey and to decide, do we go up 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet to get out of the floodway, or flood waters, not the floodway. We are in the flood hazard zone, certainly. But yeah, drive down Meadow Street and look at the front doors and yeah, your car would be underwater. So yeah, I'm not sure how this works as far as creating zoning rules and regs. I knew when I was on this board that what we created then was going to affect me, and yes, it certainly is. But yeah, engineers are going to help. What we create here could restrict what people can do down the road, which is fine because we want to make sure people are safe. And yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think somewhere in there it says an inch of elevation will prohibit development. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure me getting rid of our basement isn't going to increase it a foot, but it is worth considering.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know that after Irene, they raised the trailers up in Sheehan's trailer park up a foot. And then after this last storm, they all raised them up 2 feet because it went 10 inches over a foot.
Yeah, it wasn't enough. So, yeah, no matter what we do. And people talk about digging out the river corridor. You would have to dig out the Black River 100 feet deep to make up the volume of water that comes through this town after Irene and after July 10th. I mean, there's no way to make up that volume of water by digging out the corridor.
It's not a realistic problem solver, that's for sure.
But it is an issue, and certainly appreciate the discussion and looking into preventing future issues. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Jason, we started looking at these charts and making changes, but we didn't have you, because of my fault, and we didn't have Rose, so we want to take a look at the charts from last time and the charts from this time and see what has changed. Maybe you can tell us why it's changed, or if we can change it back, or on page 63, the first 2 pages, the second page of this document, of the old document, the second and third page of, third and fourth page of the old document, and the new document, right starting at the bottom of the first page. Okay, so we have our summary table, the developmental review and hazard areas, the developmental review board guideline for them. We have the permitted administrative permit part, the conditional use review and permit, the prohibited, the exempted, and the state permit required. And for each activity, so we try to take a look last month at each thing, and has it changed or is it the same? So we can start with new structures. So it's a little confusing because this one only talks about the flood zone in the old regs. And then the next page is about the special flood area and the floodway. So for new structures, it is a conditional use in the river corridor for the new regs. And the river corridor for structural is, new structures is also conditional. So that hasn't changed.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Maybe, do you know which ones have changed, Jason, so we don't go through all of them?
Yeah, that would be great.
I don't. Let me try to scan it real quick here. Bear with me. It's hard to look at them both here, side by
It's
side.
2 different charts on the other one, which makes
Like apples and oranges.
Yeah.
Rose,
Did you notice some change? I think Ryan pointed out.
Let me just ask, is anyone, Rose or Ryan, are you aware of anything that's changed, or while I'm looking?
So
The thing that I noticed today was that state permits were added and they're not on the other one. And you have the river corridor on this one, but we have the graph or the chart for the streams specifically, and then the chart for the flood hazard. So we have 2 separate.
Right. I think, if this is how you want to proceed, what you're calling now the local flood hazard area would need to get built into this model, and we'd need to pull out the river corridor piece. So that would need to happen. But I think I don't know about it more importantly, but the point here is that we would want to go through and make sure there's no significant departures for the flood hazard areas. So when you're looking at the model, the flood hazard area column should be more or less the same as this special flood hazard area column in your existing regulations. So we'd want to look through and see if they're the same or if anything has changed.
So one that I've noticed is changed is in the new document number 2, storage. Conditional floodway there, it's not allowed. In our existing document, line 17, storage facilities and junkyards, both are prohibited in both special flood hazard and the floodway. So that would be storage, it doesn't say junkyards, it just says storage, but would be conditional in the river corridor in flood hazard area.
Yeah, and to me, storage facilities and junkyards are two very different things. So, again, I think that's a conversation that we can have. I don't know why you don't have a storage. I don't know why you would prohibit storage facilities, but it's also hard to elevate them and have easy access into them too. So, that's a conversation we could have with the state and just kind of see if that's a big problem to keep that.
Yeah, because right now it's conditional, so that would go to the DRB, or you could put storage in the flood hazard area.
But you can see practically, like if you had your typical storage unit type thing, but you got to be elevated, a foot above the flood elevation, and let's call that 4 feet in the air. That's hard to drive up to and get your stuff in and out of, right? So it may practically be a problem.
Okay. And I know, Ted, last time we took a look at the small accessory structures, and you noticed that it's permitted in the old one, but it's permitted or conditional, I think, in this one. And Ted, you were saying that makes it go either way. So Rose can say, yeah, I can't make that decision. I'll have to send that to the DRB and put conditions on it. And you were saying that in the other way is, yeah, I can permit that. So that just saves time for people that are trying to put in those small accessory structures.
Yeah, I think, my 2 cents is with the model, it does that. So improvements to existing structures, it'll tell you both P and C. When you read in more detail, if it's a substantial improvement, it's C. You got to go through conditional use review. If it's less than that, it's P. You go see Rose and Jared. So, it's not as explicitly clear. When we did the chart in your existing regulations, we were trying to be a lot more clear. So we're basically more specific in that existing chart.
Rose, you want to weigh in on that?
No, I totally understand that. So we've been dealing with that a lot lately with this substantial improvement, substantial damage. And, we've had to weigh that all out on each property. So if it's pretty easy to understand if you probably read, everything that goes with it. So I get it.
So I think, I'm sorry, I would suggest that if you go with this model, we might want to just be more specific in the table.
Oh.
Be more specific in what?
And not say PC?
Yeah, I like, so instead of row 3, improvements to existing structures where it says P and C, I would say you should have, 3A and 3B or something like that. The first one would be non-substantial improvements to an existing structure, P. And then 3B would be substantial improvements to existing structure, C. Just so it's explicitly clear,
I think we talked about that too. Okay, so we add another.
That would be an A.
So this would be 3A?
Or however you want to number it, but yeah.
Which we already have in our existing document. So the existing document is 21 lines, the new document's 15, so we are more specific, like Jason's saying.
Okay, so Ryan, is your preference to keep the old one or to do the 3A, 3B, 3C thing?
Well, so 3A, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, but wouldn't that be line 2, non-substantial improvements to existing structures?
That's right.
Line 3 in our existing document is substantial improvement. So potentially using our existing grid, and I don't think there's anything not in our existing model that's not in the new proposed that I could see, but I'm also going cross-eyed, so.
So should I put the word substantial in front of this and 3 here, substantial improvements to existing structures, and create another row that says non-substantial?
Or
That would cover it, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Jason, would you suggest we use our existing grid, our existing table?
That might be easier, Terry. You know, again, whatever's easier for you, but that might be easier.
Okay, but are we, I'm confused about whether it's P and C, or just P now, or just C. But I see what you're saying. It only says PC because
Right.
the P was for non-substantial and the C was for substantial.
Right. So when it's a substantial improvement, it's a C. When it's non-substantial, it's a P.
Okay, so everybody wants me to just cut and paste table 5.2 instead of this one?
But when you get down further, after number,
There's some S ones.
there's different wording.
You know, I mean,
Rose,
Rose, what's the old chart or beef up the new chart?
I think we should beef up the new chart.
Me too.
I think that it has, it's clear, you know, but maybe if it also has the state permits added to it, and I think that that's a good thing. And maybe you can just put like a definition above the chart saying that the P is permitted, the C is conditional use, and do a little, I mean, it says it up there, but maybe you could say why.
Okay.
Instead of putting it in the chart.
and you know, Terry, if it's too hard to do it on the fly, we could take a crack at this outside of a meeting and, bring it back to the next one and,
Oh, yeah, I'd like to
review
do
it.
that. Can I do that with you? Ryan, would you mind if I did that?
I would not mind.
Okay.
No.
Okay, so I'll do that with you and Rose too, if you can join us in the Zoom to do that. To combine the two charts.
Yep, that'd be fine.
All right, does anybody have any other issues with this model besides fixing the charts? Did anybody find anything missing? Today, I went through the old one and it seemed a whole lot of it was about, keeping the flood insurance, obviously, not doing anything to mess that up. And all kinds of stuff about the DRB and variances and how to get them. I thought in the old chart, section 660, the development standards, in the special flood hazard area, all development should be, I guess I didn't compare it to the new one, but those are still there, right, Jason?
Yeah, those are there. Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, because I thought those were really important. And I know I sit on the board of tax abatement, and we just abated within the last couple months a whole bunch of properties in the mill because their electricity and their plumbing and everything was flooded. So they were out of luck for 166 days, and it cost the town of Ludlow a lot of money to pay for all their taxes because they couldn't use their places. So legitimately, they definitely needed that to happen. So I like that it says in here that that once it's redone, it has to be in a place that's not going to be flooded. Eric Alden, did that happen when they redid the electricity and the plumbing? Did they put it in the area that it won't be flooded?
Yes,
Okay.
we're still working through all that.
Okay, good to know, because man, that was, because I know we had to get it done before April 17th, or we'd have to pay the 15th, and we'd have to pay the school portion of it, and it was $60,000, the school portion of it. So anyway, I hope we're done now. Okay, so anyway, that stood out to me as something I want to make sure that was in the new reg, and I didn't get a chance to look through them again, make sure it was in there, but I trust you, Jason. All right, does anybody have anything else in this old one that they want to make sure it's in the new one, or vice versa? Yes, Jared.
Jared Jowdy, 156 Main Street. I had a question. I was a little confused. the new one, under section, I guess, 5D3B, this is administrative review, permitted development. It says, within the entire special flood hazard area, improvements or repairs from damage to structures that do not expand the existing footprint and do not meet the definition of substantial improvement or substantial damage. And then I jump over to,
Jason, could you give us the page number?
8.
should be on 8, yeah. So anyway, I guess I'll try to keep it. So in the special flood hazard area, it says you're not allowed to expand the footprint. But then again, in the floodway, it states that you may be able to expand horizontally in the footprint less than 500 feet. So I just don't understand how it could be allowed not to expand the footprint in a special flood hazard area, but to expand the footprint in a floodway, which is no way. So that was my question. Maybe for Jason, but maybe for a floodplain manager also. You would think that you could expand the footprint in a floodplain in a special flood hazard area, but not a floodway, the other way around. So I just wanted a little input to help understand why it seems opposite than it should be.
Jason, what do you think?
So, Jared, you're talking about right there, B, is that right?
Yes. Yep. Improvements to structures that do not expand the existing footprint is under permitted development. And yet, under the other section, section F, within the floodway, it said, except for the following, the footprint is proposed to expand horizontally into the floodway less than 500 square feet. So I'm just trying to understand why it would be allowed to be expanded in a floodway, which has more strict rules than a special flood hazard area.
You know,
I would think it'd be the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, in the floodway, you're generally in the, no rise type standard. That's actually a little new wrinkle for me. So this 500 foot thing, might want to follow up with some of the state folks to just understand that a little bit better. Maybe they feel that that's, small enough that it's okay. But to be honest, I don't know. I'd have to follow up on that.
I guess I just wanted to bring that to your attention, and Rose has a question also, or a statement.
Rose?
I was just thinking that when you said vertical, the 500 square feet, the only thing I'm thinking is in the floodway, they probably lost square footage on the bottom. So they are trying to make up with a little bit of square footage on up vertical. Maybe it's for things like, electric boxes or whatever, but that's all I could think of was maybe they were just trying to make it up in a sense.
Yeah, no, it says in the floodway to expand horizontally, less than 500 square feet.
Yeah, it does say vertically.
Yeah, that's a good question, Jared.
Yeah. Anyway,
I thought it said
wanted to bring
vertically.
that to light, that's all. Nothing really for an in-depth discussion, but
No, I think that's important to take a look at it. I'm going to write it in here.
Clarified.
I'm going to write it in here in a different color so we can take a look at that. Wait a minute, track changes. Okay, so your question is on this 5EB, lowercase b, why is this allowed? Why is this allowed in the floodway? And not in the flood hazard area? The floodway is the streamway, right?
Outside. Outside.
Yeah, outside, for special. Okay, so why is it allowed in the floodway to expand horizontally? Jason, do I ask that question of the person from the state?
You know,
And
I
if so-
don't mind. I don't mind asking it, Terry. It's up to you, but there's.
He doesn't know me from anybody, but she, so I would be happy to have you do that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll
Hey,
follow up.
Any other questions in the flood section of what we're working on? Okay, I want to respect people's time. We probably have about 25 more minutes if we want to end on time. Can we quickly take a look at the junkyard ordinance? I talked to Brendan about that yesterday because I sent him an email before and said, you know, what do you want? Jason, do you want to hang around for junkyards? You can go if you want. I really appreciate you being here.
I'm happy to go if you don't need me.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so junkyard ordinance, I talked to Brendan about this because I said, you know, do you want us to make this part of zoning? You know, because he's the one that asked us to put this on our agenda. I said, do you want to have it in zoning in the village and in the town? He said, I just want you to take a look at the ordinance and just start the conversation. So I think maybe in the next 20 minutes, we could just take a look at the ordinance and start the conversation anyway. So it is in our packet. I should find it here online. Oh wait, I got it. I got it in my Word somewhere, and then I got it in my documents. Now, how many pages is it? Actually, one page?
No.
No.
Six pages.
6 pages? Well, maybe we
One on
can,
my computer.
maybe we can just get it started
the other
anyway.
button.
I don't know.
I mean, I was just skimming it, and I mean, it's the language I expected to see, and it does exist. It seems to define junk well. Define junk motor vehicle. I guess kind of the sparking the discussion is why has no action been taken on these ordinances? But I think that's a question for the
I was
trustees.
gonna say, that's, in
So,
my opinion, that's not for us. If there's an
Exactly.
ordinance,
yeah,
why do we have to put this in zoning?
Well, he's not saying to put it in zoning, he just wants us to take a look at it, basically, and start the conversation to make sure, you know, see if if it needs to be beefed up or. Rose, can you school me on how ordinances are written? Did like the select board and the trustees each write their junkyard ordinance?
So the ordinances are written, because they don't fit in zoning, but, and the other one I mentioned was the noise ordinance, but they, usually are done by like a ticket, some type of, like you can issue it right then and there. Zoning is different. It's you have to send them a letter by certified mail. It's 7 days before they have to act on it. Then they have a certain time to appeal it, and it just goes on and on and on. But like the junkyard ordinance and some of those other ordinances, they receive a ticket, and at that point, they have to clean it up immediately.
Is that ticket from you or from the police? How does that work?
No, it's not for me, it's whoever is designated in the ordinance. I think the junkyard ordinance is the manager. It says that at the beginning.
yeah.
What is in there?
But that can be changed to
Enforcement officer.
Police officer.
or to someone else.
It's 2.03, it's right on the first page. It says, it means any police officer appointed by the Board of Trustees to enforce the provisions of the ordinance.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is this an ordinance that we already have?
Yes.
Or, okay, so this is for the village only? There's not a town ordinance?
Is this also in the town?
There's two.
Are they both the same?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. So,
Hey, Terry,
yeah.
this Brendan.
Hi, Brendan.
Hey, so I'll try and clarify for everyone that, the reason that I kind of brought this up, and you've got, and this is kind of just a jumping off point, I'll get right to it. Whereas, in the last month and a half, I fielded more calls than I'd like to admit about a trailer that was parked on Pond Street. Regarding how it looked, what it did for the village, and there was nothing in that ordinance that would allow us to do anything. Thankfully, I had, productive conversations with the owner that did, we got that through a little bit, but then, the question is, even if that was in the town right of way, was a question. So, the one thing in my position I don't like to say always is, I don't know, that's not my problem. But sometimes with these things, we need to look at, so in the future, there are situations that are, possibly affecting, someone's peaceful enjoyment, their property, etc. This ordinance doesn't necessarily have a teeth to that extent, so I'm just trying to cover all of our bases here. Again, not looking to pick a fight, I'm not looking to enforce anything extra than I already have. But I do think that because of that situation and the amount of concern that it caused in the town, it was enough for me to say that we need to look at something.
Yeah, okay.
I just can't pass that on within the side.
So I guess just in the context of that example, there's the trailer it's not anything specific for the tractor trailer bed, but what about everything else? So
I believe if you look at that footage, right, a lot of that commercial equipment is
really?
That's somewhere
Isn't
here.
it just somewhere if it hasn't moved?
That's the hit that there's nothing there that necessarily would fall into that position. There's a portion that is, cars, etc., but those are not classified as cars.
Yep. So just right off the bat, just mostly because I have a relationship there, but would we be willing to look at Manchester's junk ordinance? Because I know they have pretty extensive, there's a couple actual junkyards that they have that are licensed.
And this is not, this wasn't copied from Manchester. I know a lot of our stuff is copied from.
I don't know.
Some of the stuff has been copied from Manchester.
But I'm sure they've updated theirs to contend with some of the things they have going on there. And maybe look at this a bit more, but do you want us to kind of draft something to present to the trustees and leave it at that, Brendan? Is that?
I would think that's kind of what's been asked of me. So, and I understand what these entail. It's not an easy process. I know Chester went through it. I think they had to go through it in Cavendish. So it's not something that, we're necessarily going to look and pick on someone, but it is something that if we draft, you have to enforce, and you have to enforce it kind of lot, which to me is a daunting process. But again, I just think that from, disengaging the phone calls that I have gotten, it's something that we need to, as a town, or have to at least entertain. I'm not saying that it's going to be done in 2 months, 4 months, it's a process. But I think we just got to, as a group, look at it from all angles and try and craft something, look at other towns, etc. But it can be there, that's for sure.
So.
And then the whole other side, is enforcement.
Yeah.
I do see in 3.07, it says all junkyards, scrapyards, and places of outdoor storage of junk shall be effectively screened from public view by a fence or vegetation at least 8 feet in height. So I think there is something enforceable in there.
But it's not a junkyard.
It sounds like to me, Brendan, that there's obviously not enough in this ordinance for anyone to grip onto. and be able to do anything with. So I guess the way I would look at it is we'd have to take the thing and pick it apart and say, just start to think about the calls that you've gotten. What are the issues? What are people saying? What does everyone think?
Yeah, I think
You know,
that's a
there's
good
gonna
idea.
have to be a whole, if all the things that you just,
I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel, I think it's just having a little more people.
well, there you go. But
That's what I'm-
there's obviously things in here that can't attach to stopping it.
Yeah.
So,
It basically sounds like hiding it is what this says to do.
So that was gonna be my next comment, is the biggest point of contention I've experienced with junk ordinances is the difference between removal and screening.
Right.
So it's one thing just to say we want to put a fence or shrubs in front of it. It's another thing to say we want it to be removed.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to kind of be the kind of
That's a good way.
tipping point.
That is a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Rose, I know you did a bunch of research for us on this. Do you have other towns that you wanted us to take a look at?
But I wasn't able to get as many as I wanted to. I wanted to get quite a, I didn't pull Manchester actually. So, I mean, that's one that we should probably look at for sure. Again, I think that, if we're going to, we should have two. We should have one for the town, one for the village. We should just combine those.
Yeah.
And, because they're pretty much the same anyway, and then, go by the state statutes, whatever it says, and then I think that we can add for our own town what we want for the, for the junkyard, especially in like flood areas and stuff like that. It's not, you're not supposed to add fences and all that, but, there is several properties that have the same problem. And, so it would help to have some enforcement, better enforcement in the ordinance than what we have now.
Okay, I agree. It sounds like we need to do some research and get some stuff to everybody, the state statute, Manchester's, and whatever you have for us, Rose, before next meeting.
Yep.
And we'll take a look at how to beef it up. Okay, next on our agenda. Doesn't sound like I'll spend a whole lot more time on flood stuff next time, so should have time to work on the junkyard stuff. Okay, just a second, I just want to say one thing before I forget about it, Eric. It is about junkyards?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
That's Eric Allenchester. I was just curious what the difficulty is that the town is having with this. Because it seems like there's provisions in here for a $500 a day fine. In the notice, you give them the notice and they have 30 days to comply, or you can have a $500 a day fine. That seems like a pretty serious repercussion there. So I'm curious what the difficulty is
I think
there.
what the issue is our definition of junk isn't inclusive enough. So junk, discarded scrap, copper, brass, iron, steel, or other metals or materials, including but not limited to tires, household appliances, furniture, ropes, rags, batteries, glass, rubber debris, waste, trash, construction debris, plumbing fixtures, or any discarded or dismantled, wrecked, scrapped, or ruined motor vehicles or parts thereof. So, but as far as, I'm trying to see here, where's the exempt construction equipment?
I didn't want to jam you up, I was curious.
Yeah, no, but I think that's kind of where we're at.
Okay, energy chapter, I just wanted to say that Noah brought up that the energy chapter that I was admiring that Cavendish has was already 5 years old, and so I contacted Chris Eagleton at Regional because she's the pollution person, and she said there isn't anything new, but that they're working on something this year, and that she thought we should wait to see what the state comes up with on that. Is everybody okay with that?
Yep.
And I don't think we're gonna get to noise today, sorry, Jared, I know you did some cool research, but we will put that on next month's agenda. It already is there, actually, next. Other business, any board member comments?
Welcome, Jean.
Welcome, Jean.
Okay.
Congrats to our new member, Jean. Jean and I sit on a bunch of boards together. And any comments from citizens? Jared, did you have anything? Yeah. Cool, okay. Hope we didn't bore you out of your mind. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are out.